Brief.
Around 88.
I'm sorry.
Coast
I'm from Alabama, though.
churches
What is that?
You can add plus minus 10.
Yeah.
Line is like
and 3 days
right?
process.
Little synopsis of it in the paper. Who is it that writes the call about churches every week on Saturday? I can't remember his name, but anyway, he covered. Go back and
Well, we're going to go ahead and get started.
And then those that want to come along, they certainly can. We'll let them join us, and we'll be here for just a few more moments. My name is Chris Young, and I'm one of the park rangers at Chickamauga and Chattanooga National Military Park. And so I want to welcome you to the newly dedicated Browns Ferry Federal Road. We are now on Moccasin Bend, and Moccasin Bend is a unit of Chickamauga and Chattanooga National Military Park. Most of you who are with the Fulbrights were at Chickamauga Battlefield yesterday, where my office is located. That's another unit of the park. All told, there are something like 18 units to Chickamauga and Chattanooga National Military Park. We're headquartered in Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia, but all of our units include places like Lookout Mountain, Chickamauga Battlefield, Moccasin Bend National Archaeological District, Signal Point Reservation on Signal Mountain, not far from here, Orchard Knob Reservation, which is in the city of Chattanooga. It's a city block. We also have Missionary Ridge that has several different units and acreages along it. All told, Chickamauga and Chattanooga National Military Park encompasses about 9,036 acres spanning 2 states in the greater Chattanooga area. It's the largest national military park in the United States, and it's the oldest. On August the 19th, 1890, Chickamauga and Chattanooga National Military Park is founded as the nation's the first ever national military park ever created that will set the blueprint, the precedent for Gettysburg, for Vicksburg, for Antietam, for Shiloh. Those first parks in this country that were dedicated to the military, to military maneuvers for what happened during our American Civil War, and for that matter, for wars even before the Civil War, that this set the precedent for all national military parks, national battlefields that would come after. Even places like Saratoga and Valley Forge will come after Chickamauga and Chattanooga. In 2003, with the addition of Moccasin Bend National Archaeological District as a unit of the National Military Park, the National Park Service in Chattanooga, Tennessee gets another first. This is the first and only, at this point, only National Archaeological District in the entire National Park Service system. So where we are in Chattanooga, we were the first national military park established, and now Chattanoogans can be proud because this is the first National Archaeological District to ever be established within the National Park Service system. Chattanooga is a city of firsts as far as preservation and protection goes. 750 acres is preserved on Moccasin Bend, about 100 of which we are standing on. The newly dedicated Browns Ferry Federal Road. Now this road was built sometime in the early 1800s, maybe around 1804, 1805, as the federal road systems began being put through the Cherokee Nation and other American Indian nations in the southeast, like the Chickasaws, the Choctaws, the Creeks, and the Seminole in Florida. What we call the 5 civilized tribes in the southeast. As if the others weren't civilized. I don't really like that term. The southeast, along with other American Indian tribes throughout this country, were very civilized before Europeans arrived. But what I want us to do today is focus on what this road once was. When this road was established in the early 19th century, it was a road that was used to take goods to the west and to the east, and vice versa, from the east into the west. But by 1838, this road had a different purpose. The purpose of this road moved from being a prosperous place to those who farmed it and those who lived in the surrounding community to a place that would bring heartache to a nation of people. In 1830, a law was passed. It's called the Indian Removal Act. The law stipulates that removal will happen. In 1835, it becomes a reality. In 1835, a small fraction of the Cherokee Nation will sign a treaty. Does anyone know what that treaty was? What? Well, it was. Do you know what the name of the treaty was? The Treaty of New Echota. This small fraction of the Cherokee Nation that signs this treaty, headed by Major Ridge, will sign over Cherokee lands in Georgia, in North Carolina. All those lands held by the Cherokee Nation were signed over by a small portion of the population. By a small fraction of the 16,000 plus Cherokee that lived in the nation and that took part in the census of 1835. That small fraction sealed the fate of a nation. Beyond that, do you know who in the United States government has to ratify treaties? The Senate. The Treaty of New Echota is ratified in 1836 by that many votes. One senator changed everything. By the ratification of the treaty, the Cherokee had 2 years to get ready to move. 2 years. What I want you to do is I want you to imagine being a Cherokee citizen. I want you to imagine going about your daily life. The majority of the Cherokee were farmers. In addition to the 16,000 or so Cherokee that were in the nation, there were over 1,500 enslaved Africans within the Cherokee Nation. The Cherokee had a constitution. They had a judicial branch. They had an executive under the principal chief, John Ross. They had a legislative branch. They had a council that met. They had a written language that was devised by Sequoyah. Did you know that at least 90% of the Cherokee Nation was literate? I wonder what the percentage was, and I need to look at this, of what the U.S. population's literacy may have been. They had a printing press that printed the Cherokee Phoenix. They had laws. They had assimilated like the government had wanted them to as far as they were willing to go and not give up their heritage and ancestry. Imagine going that step, that much further, and coming in from the farm field or coming off of a plantation or coming out of a shop, coming out of a warehouse or off of a boat, and you being a Cherokee that is an entrepreneur in your own society as a riverboat captain even, or an owner of a riverboat, or a warehouse manager, or a grocer, or being a farmer miles into the nation. And this is what you read, or this is what you hear from someone giving this as kind of a town crier, that you hear this. On May the 10th, 1838, put yourself in the shoes of those who were going about their daily lives, making it day by day, living, trying to give their children an education, trying to live by the laws set forth not only by the United States of what was expected of them, but of their own laws within the nation. And this is what you get. This is a proclamation to the Cherokee. Cherokees, the President of the United States has sent me with a powerful army to cause you, in obedience to the Treaty of 1835, to join that part of your people who have already established in prosperity on the other side of the Mississippi. Unhappily, the 2 years which were allowed for that purpose, you have suffered to pass away without following, and without making any preparation to follow, and now, or by the time that this solemn address shall reach your distant settlements, the immigration must be commenced in haste, but I hope without disorder. I have no power, by granting a farther delay, to correct the error that you have committed. The full moon of May is already on the wane, and before another shall have passed away, every Cherokee man, woman, and child in those states must be in motion to join their brethren in the West. I come to carry out the determination. My troops already occupy many positions in the country that you are now to abandon. And thousands are approaching from every quarter to render resistance and escape alike hopeless. All those troops, regular and militia, are your friends. Receive them and confide in them as such. Obey them when they tell you that you can remain no longer in this country. Soldiers are as kind-hearted as brave, and the desire of every one of us is to execute our painful duty in mercy. We are commanded by the President to act towards you in that spirit, and much is also the wish of the whole of America. Do not, I invite you, even wait for the close approach of the troops, but make such preparations for immigration as you can hasten to this place. He's riding from Charleston, Tennessee, to Ross's Landing, which is near the Chattanooga Aquarium on the Tennessee River, or to Gunter's Landing, which is near present-day Guntersville, Alabama, where you will all be received in kindness by officers selected for that purpose. You will find food and clothing for the destitute at either of those places, and thence to your ease and in comfort be transported to your new homes, according to the terms of the treaty. This is the address of a warrior to warriors. May his entreaties be kindly received, and may the God of both prosper the Americans and the Cherokees and preserve them long in peace and friendship with each other. How does that letter strike you? That letter came from General Winfield Scott, the commander of all U.S. forces during the Cherokee removal. How do you think that would strike you? How do you think it struck the Cherokee, who had made something of the land, who had lived here for generations, and now they receive this proclamation? 7,000 federal troops will be moving into the area. Congress has appropriated money for removal as part of an Indian war. U.S. troops have fought in Georgia to remove the Creek in 1836, and they are fighting in 1838 in Florida to remove the Seminole. The 3rd U.S. Artillery and the 4th U.S. Artillery will be moved to this area. Cannon will be moved to Fort Cass in Charleston. 12-pounders, 6-pounders, 24-pounders will be taken to Fort Cass. Arms will be sent to the militias and the U.S. troops. and readying in case there is an uprising. An invasion is afoot. The Cherokee had fought, not by traditional means like the Seminole in Florida. The Cherokee took it a step further. They fought the U.S. in its own terms. They took it to court. That's what we do when we don't like each other. We don't fight with weapons. We take you to court and sue you. The United States Supreme Court found on the side of the Cherokee in Worcester versus Georgia that the Cherokee people were their own nation, sovereign. But the President of the United States, we don't know this for a fact, but he supposedly said that Chief Justice John Marshall and his court have made their decision, now let them enforce it. As the United States government stands, there are three branches that provide checks and balances. The legislative branch does what? Makes the laws. The judicial branch does what to those laws? They interpret those laws. They find out if they're constitutional or not. And then the executive branch, that of the presidency, the administrative branch of government, does what? It enforces and executes those laws. That is in addition, as being the executive, that the president is the commander-in-chief of what? The armies. If Jackson truly did say that John Marshall and his court has made their decision, now let them enforce it, that means that Jackson himself, as the executive, is not enforcing that law. The Supreme Court of the United States did not have the power that we see the Supreme Court having today. If you have ever been to the Capitol in Washington, D.C., you can go into the basement and see the old Supreme Court chamber. They were in the basement of the Capitol. They interpreted the laws, but in this instance, Jackson felt that it was not his obligation to carry out that law. John Ross believed that if he could wait another political term, then maybe things would change. Jackson was in his second term. Major Ridge and this small faction had already signed away the Cherokee property and land holdings. But if Ross could hold out, that maybe a Whig could take power. Maybe a Whig like Henry Clay or Theodore Frelinghuysen from New York could take control of the administrative, of the executive, and support Marshall's decision, and support that the Cherokee Nation remain. But that didn't happen. By 1838, Jackson's predecessor is none other than someone who has been formed by the Jackson administration, Martin Van Buren. Winfield Scott is sent in, and that law, that treaty, will take effect. Before we move on to the road, I want to share what the Reverend Daniel Buttrick wrote from Ross's Landing. He was a missionary to the Cherokee. And in Chattanooga at Ross's Landing, he writes this on Sunday, Sabbath, June the 10th. Remember what Scott says? Just come in. You'll be clothed. You'll be transported in ease out to the west. Reverend Buttrick tells us this. The Cherokees had been kept on a small spot, surrounded by a strong guard. Under such circumstances that it would seem impossible for male or female to secret themselves from the gaze of the multitude for any purpose whatsoever, unless by hanging up some cloth in their tents, and there they had no vessel for private use. You couldn't even use the bathroom without someone watching you. That's how cramped the quarters were. But now the limits were somewhat enlarged because more Cherokee are coming in. Yet it is evident that from their first arrest they were obliged to live very much like brute animals. And during their travels were obliged at night to lie down on the naked ground in the open air, exposed to the wind and the rain, and herded together, men, women, and children, like droves of hogs. And in this way, many are hastened to a premature grave. From what Scott writes to the reality of what removal becomes is a little different. Many of the Cherokee, think about this again. Put yourself back in that situation. Come in from the farm field. Come in from plowing your farm. Kissing your children goodnight. Coming in from the school where you may teach. Or coming in from a school where you may have traveled from Brainerd Mission here in Tennessee, back into the nation. And in many cases, you don't even get a knock on the door. But you get a door kicked in. And you're told that you have to leave. With very little items that you're able to take with you. And when you get to places like Ross's Landing, you don't find the stacks of provisions that Scott promised. You don't find the blankets upon blankets, the comfort that he promised. You find tents. You find sheets that you have to hang up. 16,000 plus Cherokee in the nation. 1,500 plus enslaved people. And 201 whites who have married into the nation will be removed, or will try to be removed. This is a multicultural nation in itself. Sure, Cherokee outweigh most people in the nation, but there are 1,500 slaves who toil on Cherokee plantations, who have no rights. No right themselves to say whether they go or whether they stay. There are 201 whites who have married into the nation that now have to make a decision. Do I stay and ask my spouse to give up their citizenship in the Cherokee Nation to stay behind? Or do I give up who I am to go with them?
So did those slaves belong to the Cherokee?
Yes, they did. They
had
were
just
property.
escaped.
No, they were property. They were property held by the Cherokee Nation. Well, not by the nation, but by the Cherokees as part of the nation. In 1838, thousands of Cherokee find themselves on the other side of this gap in Chattanooga. I won't be referring to it as Chattanooga again. I'll refer to it as Ross's Landing. Chattanooga doesn't come into existence until 1839, the year after. June the 17th, 1838, 1,072 Cherokee and others will leave Ross's Landing in boats, ferry boats, to be taken to the North Shore, the north side of Chattanooga. And then they will start along the road that will take them through the gap here, down right where we're standing, and along the roadway that we're about to walk along. A few months later, 660 other Cherokee that were supporters of Major Ridge and John Ridge and Elias Boudinot and Stan Wadey, those who supported the signing of the Treaty of Newachota, will take the same route down this road. Two completely different ideological groups of the Cherokee Nation will use this road. One in June, who support Chief John Ross and don't support removal.
John Ross was not one of the signers of the treaty.
He was not. He was trying to stop removal in Washington when Major Ridge signed the treaty. That's one group. The other group in October is the group that supports Major Ridge and the signing of the Treaty of Newachota. The Cherokee Nation, for all intents and purposes at that point, was in a civil war. The majority of the supporting group left first. However, there were supporters left behind. And this group, the very end, the very last group that leaves to go, will be a supporting group. They wait a while because you did not want a removal group to meet a supporting treaty group on the trail either. Because what happens when the treaty party gets to Oklahoma, what we call Oklahoma today, Indian Territory, the leaders who signed the treaty, Major Ridge, John Ridge, Elias Boudinot, will be killed. The Cherokee Nation's land was communal. Even though you may have a land holding yourself, you could not sell that piece of land without the council, without the nation's approval and support. And that is exactly what Major Ridge and those supporters did in 1835, without the Cherokee Council's approval. Major Ridge will be shot from his horse as he's riding on his plantation in Cherokee, or in Indian Territory. Elias Boudinot will be killed. John Ridge will be dragged from his home in front of his mother and his wife and his children and will be stabbed to death in his front lawn for signing away the lands here. Why did they do that? John Ridge was a lawyer. Major Ridge's son was a lawyer for the Cherokee Nation. He had actually been educated in Connecticut. Most of the affluent Cherokees sent their children off to be educated in New England. John Ridge met with Andrew Jackson, and Jackson told him, "You need to see the writing on the wall. This is going to happen." And Ridge,
please explain why Andrew Jackson wanted this land?
Jackson, the reason that land is wanted is, well, for a small portion, gold is found in Dahlonega.
Right.
That's one reason. The other reason is for land. Probably the biggest reason is for land, not for gold. Gold is found in Dahlonega. But the main reason is that the Cherokee Nation was right in the middle of Georgia. The Cherokee Nation was within what Georgia considered its legal boundaries. And through any means necessary, it was going to move the people out of its borders that they believed did not belong. The state of Georgia had an agreement with Thomas Jefferson in the early 1800s that he would remove those people within its borders, and Jackson was finally seeing to it. Jackson was also having to deal with something in 1830 in South Carolina called the nullification crisis. And if that had continued, Jackson might have seen South Carolina secede from the United States, and then with Georgia's discontent, with the Cherokee Nation still being here, what if Georgia had chosen to secede and go with South Carolina? There may have been a split within this country 31 years before it actually happened. There's a lot of political ramifications going on here. The state of Georgia is pressing Jackson. And Jackson himself is not a friend of the Cherokees, and not a friend of American Indians in general, just like most other presidents before him. Most other presidents wanted to deal and had to deal with the Indian problem, as it was called. Jefferson himself called them the noble savage. It's an oxymoron, kind of. That's why all of this is happening. And Jackson is seeing to it in 1838 that this is happening. Actually, not Jackson at that point. Van Buren is, on Jackson's behalf, as the executive. So what I want us to do is, as we walk along this road, I want us to remember what we've just learned in 1838. That there are people moving on this road. There are people that made something of this land, that tried to assimilate as much as possible and were willing to conform without giving up their heritage and their ancestry and who they were. And this is what they received: an army escort to the west. this becomes one of the darkest days in American history.
I'm sorry, but were all 16,000 of them moved?
Not all 16,000 were. There are going to be deserters. There are going to be those Cherokee who will actually hide out in the mountains. And many of them will become part of the eastern band of the Cherokee, which are still located in North Carolina today. It's a federally recognized tribe. The balance will be taken to modern-day Oklahoma, where the Cherokee Nation, is in existence today. The council is in Tahlequah. Keep in mind, though, that although these Cherokee are giving up physical possessions, they take their ancestry with them. They take what they consider their council fire with them. Their council, when it met, there was a fire that was burning in the Cherokee Nation that they say never went out, that they took along with them from here to there, and where it burns today. Names went. Tellico, Tahlequah, Turkey Town. There are towns that sprung up in Indian Territory that were from Tennessee, that were from Georgia. When towns are abandoned today, their names die. The Cherokee and the other southeastern Indians took their towns with them. There may have been vacant houses, but the heart of that town went on this trail. On the trail that the Cherokee will call the Nunadawasuni, the trail where we cry. And we're about to hike a segment of that trail. As we walk through the gate, you'll notice a stop to the right that has a Trail of Tears logo that says Original Route Segment Begins. We are actually on the trail, the public road, the section that those Cherokee would have walked down on the Trail of Tears. So we're going to take that walk down. We're headed close to Ross's Landing now. That's basically where the western bank of Brown's Ferry would have gone. Brown's Ferry itself, the road, would have come from behind us, close to where that warehouse, or the barn is there, the maintenance barn, across the field, and about 100 yards or so south of us is where the ferry crossing would have been. And the ferry would have ferried them across the Tennessee River, and then they would have gotten off the ferry on the opposite side and gone through the gap. Now, in June, there are 1,072 of them. Cherokee, enslaved Africans, whites, possibly missionaries, physicians, conductors, nurses, support. They camped here. 1,072 people wouldn't have fit right there 100 yards south of us, so I'm wondering just how many may have camped right here where we are, waiting for the ferry boat to take them across. As we came through the gap, or as we saw the gap and started on the federal road, I wonder how many of them at Ross's Landing for the last time. Much beyond the ridge, past that. How far is it to this territory? When do we stop? How long will it take to get there? Out of the 1,072 who encamp here in June, 149 will die. 293 will desert in North Alabama. And there will be 2 births along the trail. Imagine having to go along this trace and trail pregnant, too. They leave June the 17th. They arrive in the Cherokee Nation, or what would become the Cherokee Nation West, on September the 7th, 1838. In October, the last of the Ridge Treaty Party that will come across here after the forced removal They leave October the 11th from Charleston, Tennessee. There are 23 deaths recorded. They arrive January the 7th of 1839. Takes them from October the 11th to January 7th to get to Indian Territory. This trail that the Cherokee, as we remember, called the Nuna Dowasuni, the trail where we cried, this was the final journey for many of them. The road that was built here in the early 1800s was destined to bring heartache and hardship to a nation, uncertainty to a nation. But what the Cherokee want us to remember, what the other southeastern tribes want us to remember, is that they are still here. This trail of tears was not the final chapter of the Cherokee. This trail was not the final chapter of us as a country. It was a dark chapter, but it wasn't the final one. 150 years ago, today, on October the 27th, 1863, 1,500 Union soldiers in 50 pontoon boats hit that side of the shore and created what we would consider a beachhead. They pushed Confederate soldiers away. And on October 27th, 1863, opened up what was to be called the Cracker Line, the supply line. Soldiers in Chattanooga had been starving for over a month, surrounded by Confederates. But now, in the early morning hours of October 27th, this road that was once used and what became disheartening, tragic, 25 years earlier, became a road of hope, a road bringing supplies to a starving Union army. This became a road that would bring well-being and sustenance to a Union army that now, by 1863, was part of a larger force in the United States to rid this country of slavery. A road that would be used to support the freedoms of over 4 million in bondage. That's the history of this road. That's the history of what we walked upon and the history of this section of the Tennessee River. Heartache, uncertainty that led to survival and to the freedoms of others. What we're going to do is we are going to need to make our way back. We have just a few minutes to make it back, so we're going to have to pick up our pace just a little bit because it's my fault. I kept you. Blame me. Blame me. Tell the bus driver it was my fault. I'm going to walk back. You can stop. You can ask me questions. We'll walk along. I'm not going to do formal questions here. For those of you who aren't on a timetable to get back to the bus, I'll stay a little bit longer at the trailhead so that we can talk and you can ask questions there. Okay? I encourage you, those of you who are local and those of you who are students, come back. Bring friends back. Share this place with others and encourage them to come and learn their history. The history of who we are as a people and who we are as a country. Do that. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you.